What's up guys, welcome to Talking Poodoo, a Star Wars show. I'm your host Grant Burton and today I'm reviewing Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray. Claudia Gray, one of my favourite Star Wars writers of all time now. This is yet another great Star Wars book from her. In fact, all of her lineup of Star Wars books, brilliant. Bloodline, Lost Stars, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, this, really good books. So check out her work if you're really interested in the new expanded universe. This is another great entry into the Star Wars expanded universe because it feels really important, it feels significant, it's adding to the characters and the overall world and universe. So let's get into it into a bit more detail, shall we? Story. This is set a few years before the Phantom Menace. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, they are on an assignment on a planet called Pajal, I believe it's called. There they are interacting with a Jedi known as Rael Averross, who is standing in as a regent for the young queen who's about to become the queen fully. Meanwhile, there's some terrorist acts going on, there's a lot of opposition there, disagreeing with the way things are being run there, because there is this evil, greedy corporation called the Zerka Corporation, who are kind of butting in, trying to seize control for themselves, it seems. So the Jedi have to come up with a way of dealing with all of this. So one of the things I really liked about the story of this is that it actually plays out like a movie. It feels like this could have been one of these standalone Star Wars movies in many ways, in that it's got like the action scenes, it's got the setup, it's got the whole big narrative arc. It feels like these are scenes from a film, and that's great because you don't get that much in the Star Wars books. Many times the Star Wars books are really focused in on certain elements, and it feels much more like just a book rather than a visual auditory thing, and this can, I think, easily translate to that. I'm not going to go into spoilers just yet, but this story does add to the overall universe. It adds little details and information here and there, so particularly when it comes to the certain characters and their relationships, and if you're a fan of the prequels like I am, or if you're not, this will add certain elements, particularly with the Phantom Menace because Qui-Gon's in that. You'll get a lot more backstory about that, you'll get a much better understanding of him as a character and as an individual, and it'll explain some of his backstory and actions in that movie a lot better. So one of the key elements of this book is that it highlights the fact that there were ancient Jedi long ago who prophesied things about the future. Now, we all was known that the Jedi were able to predict certain things yet to come. This really delves into that into a bit more. It doesn't exactly explain how it happens, or it's just through meditation and visions. Qui-Gon is obsessed with these prophecies. The slight problem I had with this book is that a lot of the prophecies that we actually hear about, that he's studied, they're very on the nose, they're not very subtle, they're clearly relating to events in the big Star Wars franchise films. So I think there could have been a bit more of a subtlety there, maybe a fewer of them as well, rather than... So there's one that's clearly all about Leia and the fact that she has Ben Solo, and then there's others about... Like, I believe there's one that hints at Qui-Gon's death in the Phantom Menace and Dooku's turn to the dark side. So these prophecies, while interesting and fascinating, are a bit on the nose. I also think that maybe the book delves into them a little bit too much, because if everything can be predicted, if everything can be prophesied, it kind of loses the sense that this is all just happening, it's all exciting and action-packed. Well, because now it's suggesting that everything's planned out and it's just like part of destiny and so on. So that might not be for everyone. But as the story pans out, there's a lot of twists and turns, a lot of surprises. I'm not going to say what they're dealing with exactly because that's spoilers, but there were two big moments in this book, about halfway through and then again towards the end, which I was gobsmacked at because I didn't see coming. But they're really smart, they make sense, they make you want to reread the book as well, because now you know these things, you can actually spot things differently. And yeah, it's really well done. Claudia Gray, the writer, done a good job here of plotting things out and writing this story. Again, I love her as a writer. I'm going to start looking up some of her other work not related to Star Wars because she's just a damn good writer. It's well paced, it never slows down, everything feels important and relevant. And we are primarily on the planet of Pajal. This planet is interesting. It's not one of the best planets I've ever seen or heard of in Star Wars, but she's done a good job of explaining it in this just one book. I don't believe it's in any other Star Wars source. I could be wrong on that. But the fact that now that I've read this book, this feels like a living, breathing world is quite impressive. I mentioned earlier that the Circa Corporation is in this book. Star Wars fans will have heard of these, big Star Wars fans that is. They're not in the films, they're not even in the TV shows or anything like that. This is primarily from the Knights of the Old Republic video games. And with them being introduced in here and with there being rumours of a Knights of the Old Republic film in the works, maybe this could be hints at what's to come. Maybe they are indeed getting a Knights of the Old Republic film or Knights of the Old Republic related content out there in the future, and this is just hitting at that. Fingers crossed it is, because Knights of the Old Republic is brilliant. And without going into spoilers, the finale of the book, the way the book ends and comes to a conclusion, is really well done. All the loose ends, all the characters merge together really well. All the things that didn't quite seem to be connected end up connecting. It's just really well done. So to talk a bit more about the characters, this book primarily focuses on Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and their relationship. It's interesting to see that prior to the events of Phantom Menace, they didn't always get along, to the point where Qui-Gon was thinking about getting rid of Obi-Wan and not being a master at all. It's pretty early in the book, so it's not that much of a spoiler, but Qui-Gon was offered a position on the Jedi Council. So much of this book is about Qui-Gon dealing with that decision. Does he want to abandon his apprentice so he can become a master, simply because they're not getting along, they're not meshing very well? It's really fascinating to explore this relationship in a bit more detail. And it adds to their backstory, because again, in the Phantom Menace, they talk about how Qui-Gon hasn't always gotten along with the Jedi Council and so on, so this actually shows you that. But what I think is probably the best thing that's introduced in this book is the character of Rael Averross. Rael Averross is a Jedi who, he was introduced to the Jedi pretty late in life, in that he wasn't the young kid that you usually are when you become a Jedi. He was a little older, so he was never fully indoctrinated into the Jedi ways. He is a bit of a independent individual. He doesn't have the usual Jedi mannerisms or way of speech or of doing things. He does break the rules. He doesn't follow all the Jedi ways that much, if at all. So he's a really fascinating and interesting character, especially when he's essentially the polar opposite to like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, who are strictly following the Jedi ways. So this character, I think, is brilliant, and hopefully we'll see more of him in other works. I know he is in the Dooku audiobook that was released recently, but I'm not sure. I haven't listened to that yet, so I don't know if he's actually a character in there or if he's just mentioned or something. And speaking of Dooku, Dooku is in this book as well. It's not only the Master and Apprentice relationship of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, it's the relationship between Dooku and Qui-Gon as well. It briefly goes into that, and it delves into possibilities as to how Dooku parted ways with the Jedi and why he went to the dark side. And that's really interesting. If it doesn't, it's just a shame it doesn't really delve into it into huge depth, but it's there and it's hinted at, and it's good to see their relationship, and this shows how Dooku was as a Jedi Master. And I should also point out now that Rael Averross was Dooku's apprentice before Qui-Gon. So they're all related, they're all interlinked and connected in there. And it's almost like a extended family now, and it's really quite interesting. Sadly, outside of these characters, the cast and characters in this book are a little stereotypical. Of course, you can't dive into every single character in this book, otherwise it would be a big epic book. It's only like 300 to 400 pages, so there's only so much you can actually do. But the characters do feel a little stereotypical at times. They are a bit one note at times as well, but they get the job done, they get the point across, and then not dislikable or bad by any means. It's just they haven't got the big backstory or development that the main characters have. It's also the case of that the side characters aren't characters from the films. So two of the big side characters are Pax and Rahara, who are essentially smugglers and thieves who are looking for Kyber crystals so they can sell on the black market. And that's why they come to Pajal looking for Kyber crystals, only they don't find them. And the problem with these characters is, while there's a lot of attention spent on them, but they're not all that interesting. Yes, they've got interesting backstories. So Pax, for example, was raised by droids, giving him a really interesting, unique perspective on things, while Rahara used to be a slave for the Zerka Corporation. So yes, they are interesting in that regard, but what they're actually doing in this book, the way they interact with the other characters, it doesn't always feel like the attention should be on them as much as it is. But yeah, a little disappointing for them characters. And of course, there are links to real world modern events, and yeah, the fact that there are elements of politics and terrorism in there as well. There are some connections you can make to the real world. It is sending a message and it is addressing themes that are going on in real life. So that's quite interesting for Star Wars, for a Star Wars expanded universe book to do. But that's what I thought of Master and Apprentice. I thought it was pretty darn good, if not great. I'm going to go into spoilers in just a little bit now, so you've been warned. If you haven't read this book, go read it. Come back, watch the rest of this. In the meantime, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment and feedback down below. Let me know what you think of Master and Apprentice. Leave some questions down there as well if you want, and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. You can also go to Twitter and Instagram and follow me at _Grant Burton. But let's get into those big juicy spoilers. Full spoilers now. So I think probably the big thing about this is that Fanry, the Queen, who has just became the Queen towards the end of the book, she's the villain. I did not see that coming at all. It makes perfect sense. It makes you rethink the whole story and the relationship she has with Ray Lavros. But it's really well done the way that it happens. It's shocking. It's surprising. Yeah, really good reveal. Really good moment. And yeah, just well done. And there's another big reveal about halfway through about the opposition who we think are the terrorists. It turns out, no, they're not. They're just activists, basically. They're just outspoken political activists, and there's actually another group which are the terrorists, and it turns out they work for the Queen. So these big reveals, really well done, really well arranged and planned out ahead of time, and they make you want to go back and read the book again knowing this information, so you can actually pick out certain things and like, yeah, that was hinting at that and that was suggesting that, because I didn't see these coming. So yeah, really well done to get me like that. So there was one little element which I was a little frustrated by, and that's that Qui-Gon, as a representative of the Republic, did not want to agree to the treaty being signed towards the end of the book. So Ray Lavros, of course, was mad at him. He was angry at them because he felt that Qui-Gon was jeopardizing all the work that he'd done up to that point. So I understand that. But why did they not really talk it out properly? Yes, there is a moment where they meet on a staircase and they have like a good heart-to-heart talk a bit, but they never dive into it fully. They never actually address the issues at hand fully. And for Jedi, you feel like that's something they should do. And yes, Rael isn't your typical Jedi. He is a bit more emotional. He doesn't follow the Jedi ways exactly. But I just feel like it was a little off that at least Qui-Gon wasn't wanting to talk it through and actually address some of the issues and have a good conversation about it. Instead, Rael was just angry at him constantly from that point onwards until towards the end when it's revealed that Fanry is the villain all along. So I was a little frustrated by that. So, while speaking of Rael, the last thing I want to get into is that Rael, while being a Jedi, clearly does not follow the Jedi ways. And no one addresses this. No one actually questions Rael's allegiance to the Jedi. No one addresses the fact that maybe he's fallen off the good side a bit, and it's odd. Yes, Qui-Gon's got a relationship with him, he's a friend, so I get that he doesn't want to bring it up maybe, especially not when other people are around. But it's pretty clear that Rael is not your typical Jedi. It's pretty clear that he's not following the Jedi ways. So why is no one talking about this? Why is no one addressing this? Is this not a problem? Is this something that he shouldn't be punished for? I don't know. It doesn't really delve into that too much. It sounds like the Jedi can essentially just do what they want so long as they're not doing really bad things. But that's all I really got to say about this book, because I do think it's a book you should read if you're a big Star Wars fan. It's a really well done book. It's a really well written book. Claudia Gray is brilliant. I'm going to read all of her Star Wars books as they come out now, and I'm going to look up some of her other work as well to see what else she's done. But I like this book a lot. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, yada yada yada, you know the drill. Thanks for watching.